Ambassador Karen Pierce, United Kingdom Permanent Representative of the United Nations, welcome again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to ask you, we have a very limited time, I'd like to ask you about the session today. The lack of implementation, no doubt, was the reason why Britain has called for the convening of this consultation. Did you find that the council members found a way to pressure, to convince the parties to implement faithfully the agreements?
Well, we wanted, as you know, we are the penholders for Yemen file in the Council, and we wanted to hear from the Special Envoy and also General Lollersgaard about what exactly was happening on the ground, because, as you say, not enough progress has been made, and in some respects we're going backwards. So to that extent, it was a snapshot of what's happening rather than a big strategic meeting, but we had a very good briefing from the Special Envoy Martin Griffiths and from General Lollersgaard about the detail of what's happening on the ground. All the council members were able to express their views and all made clear that intransigence from the parties wasn't acceptable and that a way needed to be found to implement phase one. And we discussed a whole range of ways in which that might be done without coming to a particular conclusion. That's for Martin, but it was a good meaty discussion.
Okay. Zero deployment by the Houthis so far. And your foreign minister, Mr. Jeremy Hunt, after his most recent visit to the area and to Aden, has said that he warned that Stockholm peace process risked collapse within weeks. Of course, without implementation. Do you share his views?
Oh, well, yes, of course. You know, the Foreign Secretary was the first foreign minister, I think, to go to Aden for a very long time from a Western country, and he was able to see it all for himself. And he's absolutely right. The Stockholm Agreement was always fragile, and it is at risk of collapse unless the parties follow through on their commitments to implement. And that's one of the things General Lollersgaard is going to be concentrating on the next few days.
What do you think the reasons are for the lack of implementation as you see them?
I think fundamentally, at the heart of the matter is the fact that neither side have trust or confidence in the other. That does not excuse not carrying out what they committed to at Stockholm. At this stage, I don't think we are ready to blame one party or the other. I will say that Martin told the Council that President Hadi had been extremely helpful. We don't want to blame one side or the other at the moment, but I think the briefing was clear, and if there isn't progress, and if Stockholm does collapse, the Security Council will need to think about further measures. And that's a very, big step, obviously, but this is a very important issue, and we want there to be progress.
The Houthis always have a pretext that they don't withdraw, they don't clear the roads and the streets of mines because that will make them more vulnerable. Is that a good excuse to hold the whole country, the whole international community hostage?
I'm not going to speak for the Houthis. I think the real problem is that there is a lack of trust on both sides on the ground, which means that they always fear the other will get a military advantage. It's one reason why we as Britain, and indeed most council members, have been so insistent on finding a political way forward. And one of the other things Martin Griffiths told us today is that he will also begin to work in earnest on the politics, on the political settlement. As we've said before, this eventually needs to be something that encompasses all Yemenis and is genuinely representative.
But he, in this seat, in the end of February, he told me, and he agreed with President Hadi, that there will not be comprehensive talks, which he hoped to hold in the spring, before the summer, he told me, live and on the record. But he said that it will not be done unless the HADATH agreement is implemented.
I think we have always faced a situation where you needed two things to take place at the same time, as it were, or at least in parallel. We need HADATH to be implemented, but we also need to be able to have set out by Martin Griffiths a roadmap for the future structure of Yemen and its government,
but
so
after
that people know they will be involved in a representative politics. exact sequencing is for Martin, but I think it's true that we need to, or Martin needs to, give some idea of the direction of travel on the politics, and that in turn will help with the lack of trust between the parties, which is leading to HADATH not being implemented.
Has the RCC, the Redeployment Coordination Committee, found a solution for the security forces that are going to fill the vacuum after the withdrawals, because they have a huge gap between them on this?
Well, General Lollisgaard is working on that now and hopes to convene more meetings in the next few days, but I don't have more details at the moment.
Any good news on the exchange of prisoners and detainees and kidnapped persons?
They're making progress, but unfortunately we are not there yet. The Security Council expressed its hope, indeed its expectation, that this issue can be resolved soon. It's a very important confidence-building measure. It wouldn't take much to get it over the line. Various agencies are playing a very helpful role. We just need to be able to get it over the line. So all parties need to come along in good faith and be ready to make compromises so we can start.
Any movement on the TAS understandings, which I noticed in your press statement today by the P5, called it the TAS agreement? Any movement, any relief to the TAS people besieged by the Houthis?
There's work in progress, but I don't have anything I can tell you specifically today.
Okay. What can you tell us about what you heard about the fighting that erupted and increased? The violence increased to levels not known since December in Hodeidah last weekend. What can you tell us? What did they tell you, Michael Lollisgaard, General?
We didn't go into detail on this occasion about that fighting. We've always said that there were bound to be violations from time to time. It's a matter of how serious, for how long, and whether things can get back on track. So we continue to watch that very carefully. We continue to support General Lollisgaard and the Special Envoy, and also we supplement what happens in the Council with bilateral talks to try and help the UN do its job.
We have 2 minutes, but I'd like to ask you about these letters sent by the Emirates, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and Yemen, about 4 letters so far since December about violations committed by the Houthis. There's about 1,754, according to them, detailed in letters to the Security Council, and I'm sure you've seen them. How do you view this?
Well, you know, parties send letters to the Security Council giving their views. It's for General Lollisgaard to work for the UN and monitor the ceasefire and report to the Security Council. So I'm sure he takes count in his reports of all the evidence given to him.
So how about the letter by the Yemeni mission on the 7th of this month to the Security Council, which I'm sure, about the massacres and the crimes being committed in northern Hajj, in Hajur, by the Houthis and surrounding and besieging the people there?
We didn't discuss that in detail today.
Okay.
I repeat, it's for General Lollisgaard and the Special Envoy to report to the Council on what's happening, and then the Council takes a view. But I think the overriding point is that we need to bring the war to an end so that agencies and the UN can get in throughout Yemen, helping ordinary people there, getting them food and medicine and medical treatment where necessary.
Was the continuous arming of Iran to the Houthis ever discussed in this session or other sessions?
This was a very short session that was
Okay.
designed specifically to give us a snapshot of what was happening around Hodeidah at this particular time. There'll be a bigger session, longer session, over the coming weeks when all these issues will no doubt be addressed.
The Council members are aware of the continuous arming of Iran.
Well, whether or not it would be continuous arming, we would look to the UN report and we would take our cue from the evidence in the UN report. But yes, the Council has had a number of occasions where it has discussed the provision of Iranian-made weapons to the Houthis and the Houthi attacks on civilians in Riyadh and in the United Arab Emirates. And the Council has condemned those.
Of course. Well, my last question is really, there are those who say that equating recognized sovereign government like the President Hadi's government with militia gangs that usurp power by force is grossly unfair, and that they understand why you're doing it, but they see it as appeasing the aggressor. What do you say to them?
I don't agree that we equate the two.
Okay.
As you say, there is a legitimate government of Yemen, and that is recognised in Security Council Resolution 2216. And then there was an insurgency, Ansar Allah. But what we have now is a conflict that needs to be brought to an end. The fact that the Houthis are not already a government does not automatically rule them out of taking part in the political process. And what Martin Griffiths is now going to try and do is set out the parameters of that political process so that eventually Yemenis can have a truly representative government covering all the country.
Karen Pierce, United Kingdom, Permanent Rep to the United Nations. We thank you as always for this exclusive interview and wish you the very, very best of luck. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Salah. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you.